Hello, everybody. As we speak today, and for those of you, if it's your first time checking out the Jacob Viewer Show, I typically do interviews. There's over, 100 interviews out, close to 200. If you go on Spotify, over 100 and I think five on YouTube. But there's even more on Spotify from 2 or 3 years ago if you want to dig up my past. But people have asked me, how do you interview a former United States vice president? Classmates have asked me that. Teachers have asked me that. I'm back in high school even. Um, Family members at Thanksgiving. How did you interview Donald Trump's son? How did you interview band members from bands like Weezer or Train? How did you interview so many people? How did you interview an NBA owner? How did you interview somebody who walked on the moon? Well, the correct answer would be I reached out, and that's the truth. But what if I could tell you it's kind of a networking trick. And although you might not start your own show, you can still apply my networking method in a way. And you can use this to help you to maybe reach out for internships to people, reach out to famous people for advice. So I'm going to share some things with you. But as we speak, because I don't know when you'll watch this video, it is October 16th, 2024. Wow. And as we speak right now, I have 743 subscribers on YouTube. Okay. Some people would say that's small, some people would say that's good. On Instagram, I have 732 followers. On Facebook, I have 605 friends. And on X, formerly Twitter, I have 287 followers. Now, also, if you look at my page as Jacob Viewer, you'll see I follow like 1/3 the amount of followers I have. But still, getting back to the point, if you have 700 followers on your Instagram, which I think I had like 710 followers when I had Eric Trump on a few months ago, Donald Trump's son, who's obviously pretty famous and well known, you'd think for yourself, Eric Trump, 2.5 million followers on Instagram, Jacob Buer at the time, like 705 followers. How does somebody from central Indiana, a college student, end up getting somebody like Eric on? Or you might think, how does a college student with 700 followers end up getting on a band member from Weezer? Weezer is selling out NBA arenas. That's 20,000 people. And as a college student, I was able to interview one of their members or other people I've interviewed, like Apollo Moonwalkers. You're probably thinking, an Apollo Moonwalker, there's only four of them living as I record this video, only 12 of them walked on the moon. You'd be thinking, where would an Apollo Moonwalker, who's 80, almost 90 years old, where would he choose to spend his time? If he's going to do an interview, he'd do it with Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? Or maybe he'd do it with like Fox News. He did it with me as a high school senior over a year ago when I was still in high school, my last week of high school. And you're probably thinking, how was I able to get him on then? I was so young. I could have, for all he could have known, I could have been a moon landing denier, bossing him around once he joined the show. I'm not. I asked him questions about his walk. I believe he landed on the moon. Sorry for all those who don't believe it. You're entitled to your own opinion. But back to the point, I just gave you some examples between bands, extremely smart people like moonwalkers, the Trump family, all super relevant things. Well, okay, the moonwalking was a long time ago, but the bands, the Trump family, people like that. And you're probably like, how does somebody, and I told you how many followers I have as this video was shot. How does somebody with that amount of followers get on all those famous people? Well, the correct answer would be I send emails to them. But I also will have a catchy subtitle. And why does that matter? Somebody like Eric Trump, which I emailed him by the way, I sent him 6 emails. I'm not going to tell you his email, by the way, so don't even ask. Over a period of 6 months. I guarantee you the first 5 he didn't even see. Why? Because the 6th email I sent was a slam dunk. I titled it College Student with Podcast from Indiana. Well, what do you think he thought? Indiana's a historically red state. I'm a college student. Hmm, better open the email, wonder what it says. I said I was a Purdue student. Eric Trump's father-in-law, not Donald Trump, his father-in-law, played football at Purdue. Because of that, when he opened up my email, the title line was college student, and the first sentence was, I attend Purdue University and host a show. It was personal to him because he had been to Purdue before, as he mentioned in my interview. When he verbally committed to coming on over email, his assistant reached out, by the way, never him, after that. I thought, oh, he's just picked me because I'm a college student and, his dad's running for president 2024 and, he wants to do an interview and understand the youth, right? The first thing he said on my show was, I've been to your school many times. It's a great school. My father-in-law played there. So there was a personal element. So when you reach out to somebody who's famous, in that case, like Eric Trump, you got to make it personal. I didn't think that being a Purdue student and mentioning that in an email that I would send to Donald Trump's son would end up me getting him on my show for 15 minutes. I didn't even have to send questions ahead of time. So if Eric is watching this or his staff, it was a completely free press interview. Not every famous person does that, by the way, but there was a personal element. I got his line because college student. If I just put podcast guy who wants to interview you, he gets tons of media requests. Most people want to interview him. His dad's running for president. It's 2024. So I had a personal appeal. This young kid doing something cool made him click on it. And then when he clicked on it, something caught his eye, Purdue student in the text. And of course, he had a personal connection with Purdue because his father-in-law played football, if I recall, something like that, or had some sort of association with Purdue, and he had been here before, he said. So personal elements can matter when you reach out to famous people for networking. And obviously for me, the case was to interview him. But maybe for you, you'd reach out to somebody, maybe not Eric Trump, but you'd reach out to maybe a CEO of a, Fortune 500 company, you know, or you'd reach out to a doctor if you're going to medical school, asking them for advice on a paper. Make sure that your subject line is catchy. You can't just say, I need advice, doctor, if you're sending an email to a doctor that you want to read over your scholarly paper. What do you want to put in there? Well, say you're a medical student at IU. IU is a great medical school, saying that as a guy who attends Purdue. You better put on that subject line, IU med student, and then advice in parentheses. That'll get their attention. And then when you open up the email, make sure you have proper greeting. Your subject line is what gets them to open the email. But you got to have a really good paragraph or a really good hook in that email so that they don't just delete it right away. Because if it's an email that's 3 paragraphs long and the hook is horrible, the first 2 sentences, they're going to delete it. What if I would have been a student at, oh, I don't know, Harvard University? Let's not use Harvard because Eric Trump would have had some sort of relationship with Harvard, growing up on the East Coast, part of the Trump family. What if I would have gone to Montana State University? Nothing against Montana State. Maybe he does have a personal connection, but let's say he doesn't to Montana State. He would have opened it because it was a catchy subject line, part one. But then part two, the hook didn't really fit his element. For me, I firmly believe why I had him on was, yeah, number one, I was a college student reaching out, which he probably admired. He's a nice guy. But number two, I had a strong hook and it made it personal to him. I've reached out to some of his siblings. They haven't responded. They're also very busy people. There's a chance I never even opened it. But it's all about that subject line in an email or the hook. So that's something to remember. So if you're sending an email to somebody, Maybe they're not even super famous. The doctor case, like I said, have a good subject line. Don't just put some lousy thing like quick question, question mark. Just say something like, if you're a medical student, that example. If you're a business student, you're reaching out to a prominent business person in your hometown, you know, could use some advice. Dot, dot, dot. Harvard business student. If you go to Harvard, don't lie if you don't. Okay. Oh, a Harvard student from the same hometown as me reached out. I better look into that. But again, you still got to have that strong hook. So it works in both ways. So those are some networking techniques. And I hope you learned something. And just to tell you how networking can work, let me give an example of a band. Early in June, I reached out to a drummer. I believe like June 5th or June 6th, we'll say. Maybe it might have been June 3rd, maybe June 9th. I asked him if he'd do an interview with me. He said yes. 3 weeks later, we did an interview on Zoom for 28 minutes. He did it from wherever he lived in California. He's part of the band Train. He's the drummer. Shout out to Matt Musty. And we did an interview for 28 minutes, or like 30 minutes, a little longer. And after, I said I would love to see you at some point. It just so happened that Train was playing a show in Indianapolis, July 14th. I had interviewed him June 28th. So we had talked that day, and he said, actually, the list for that show doesn't look so full. I can probably put you on the list and you can bring a date with you. And I'll be a good wingman and I'll even give the girl drumsticks. I said, thank you, sir. I'll take you up on that. I'm a 19-year-old who's single. Well, I ended up not bringing a girl, but rather a really good friend, which Matt still appreciated, by the way. Went to the concert, went to Will Call, got the tickets. I was not backstage, but I was very close, 3 rows up in a venue of 20,000. Matt came out, greeted me. I never met him before in person. And he ended up giving me earplugs because I was so close. I did not wear them, by the way. I refuse to wear earplugs if you're going to a sporting event or a music concert. I expect it to be loud or stay home. That's just my opinion, though. I also don't have severe ear pain, although I have had a lot of ear infections. But um, that was the first time I met him in person. And just 2 weeks earlier, I'd interviewed him. And 4 or 5 weeks prior to that, we didn't even know each other. I mean, I knew of him because of Train, because I follow bands closely, and I like to interview musicians, so I keep an eye on them. But just a few weeks earlier, about a month earlier, we didn't even know each other. And that's how networking went from an interview to a concert. And a good friend of mine drove 2.5 hours up from southern Indiana to attend that concert, and we had a great time. And my friend was trying to give me a lot of money at the end of the night, and I said, you do know that it was a gift from the Train drummer himself. So that's just a way of networking. And do you want to know how it started? By an email. What did my email say to him? College student with a show. And when he opened that email, I think one of the first things I said was, I like drummers. I've always been fascinated by drummers. So I didn't just say that I like Train, which I do, but I made it even a step more personal. What is he with the band Train? He's the drummer. Well, a lot of people like Train. A lot of people like the singers. I made it personal. I like drummers, which I really do like drummers. When I turn on a song, drums are the first thing that appeal to me before I hear vocals, not the electric guitar bass sound. Sorry, guitarists, I've interviewed guitarists like the Weezer guy, but the drums just, when I hear that banging, it appeals to me. So again, I had this strong personal thing, college with a show, and Matt too probably thought, huh, what is this? He opened up the email, and I had something positive to say. That's another example of how I networked, led to an interview, and even led to a really fun concert that I didn't have to pay for. So shout out to Matt. But those are just some techniques for networking. And you might not host a show like me. That's okay. You might not want to either. It's a lot more work than you think. But I hope I explained to you how to network. And you can apply these while you're in college. If you're watching this and you're not in college, If you're in high school, take this advice for as you go into the workplace or whatever you're doing after. Do it. I'll give one last example for networking. This doesn't even include my show. Maybe you go to college and you want to get to know your professor better. What should you do? Well, sit out when you send an email to them. If you want to meet with them, say you're in a class of 200 people. I'm going to be real with you, your professor does not know your name. But if you email them and you ask them, hey, when are your office hours if they're not posted? Or could I meet you at this time at this location? And you sign your name at the end of the email. Some people don't do that. It's going to be more personal, and that professor is going to remember it and he's going to know you. That's a way to move up against some brownie points with your teacher or your professor. Another great method for networking if you're in college or some sort of school, trade school even. So those are just some tips for networking, doing good over emails, and I hope you take this advice sincerely. And as always, thank you for watching. It feels kind of weird doing solo videos like this because I do a lot more interviews than solo content. So thank you so much for watching this, and make sure you check out those interviews of those people I mentioned in the video too while you're at it. And hit that subscribe button, that like button, and most importantly, don't be scared to reach out. I can't believe I waited until the end to say that, but you gotta reach out too. Don't just draft the email and be too scared to send it. Send it. What do you have to lose? Guess what? I've sent a lot of emails and never gotten responses. But I've also sent emails, and I told you how far those emails went. And I would say that they were big wins in my life. Thank you all again.